So I decided to kind of title this this exchange with you, this conversation, limiting or limitless ? And on reflection, I realized it was all in my mind. Whether it is limiting or whether it is limitless, I've come to realize that it's all in my mind. It's all in all our minds, I suppose. But firstly, welcome everybody, and thank you, Paddy, for the opportunity to spend some time with you. I guess firstly, I'd just like to introduce myself briefly and give you maybe a little bit of short background on me and a little bit of context. So my name is Michel Colaci. I was born in Switzerland. However, I live in West Cork now, and I've spent the past, more precisely near Rosscarbery. I know earlier on, as we started off, Warren Strand came up as a point of reference. Warren Strand will actually be featured in the video that we're going to see in a little while that I produced. So yeah, I live in West Cork near Rosscarbery, and I spent the past, I suppose, 3 or so years transforming a vision that I had into reality, to transition from a corporate senior management role in the city, commuting every day, and being connected 24/7 pretty much through various digital media and so on, through my inbox and Teams and various other things, to a life on my own terms, designed based on the lifestyle of my dreams. And more precisely, I had decided that I wanted to be 100% location independent without commuting. Now, when I say location independent, I don't mean like I'm going to be a nomad, but that I'm going to have a base. But essentially, I work 100% location independent. Secondly, I was going to create businesses and projects that solve problems and bring some meaningful value to others. And thirdly, to design my life around my terms and my schedule. So I'm just going to switch to slide 2. So I've since founded, since leaving the corporate world, I have since founded 3 ventures in that time. First, the ImmunizeNet, which aims to empower and enable parents and educators to support children in leading safer and healthier digital lives. Secondly, ScreenZest Digital, which aims to help people be awesome online and through digital media, whether it's through video, through photography, websites, apps, that kind of thing. And lastly, West Cork Discovered, which has been a bit more of a personal project around my love for West Cork, and essentially aims to promote West Cork and inspire people to connect with its amazing natural wonders, get out, explore, discover, and make memories. I guess I wanted to kind of share everything that I get to experience every day about living here with others as well. And I also have some further ideas around creating and leveraging a West Cork brand to help sort of smaller craftspeople, artists, and so on, give them a platform to be seen and heard in a very, very noisy online space. Particularly social media is getting immensely noisy. Getting attention is incredibly hard and getting harder and harder and harder. And it's, get more driving towards pay to play. So I feel, particularly in the future, really small players are going to struggle to stand out in that space. Now, all of these ventures are currently very much in a growing phase, but with significant growing pains. Mainly because I try and run these on my own or with the help of just some freelancers at the moment. So on that note, if anyone's interested or knows anyone who might be interested in exploring any of these ventures with me, then let's connect. I've included the websites on this slide where you can find my contact details. Hit me up on LinkedIn or Instagram, wherever, and we can connect. But back to today's kind of main topic, I suppose. So today's really about sharing with you a story, probably quite a personal story of what I've learned and observed about my mindset, and the power of a shift in mindset. Now, a lot of what I feel I've learned, I don't think I can really explain why, as I'm sort of not really trained to understand the intricacies of the brain. So perhaps someone among you who is, you know, particularly knowledgeable in this area and can help me or help us understand some of the observations that I've made in terms of creativity and so on. Some are still maybe more questions rather than answers around observations, and others were triggered by massive changes in mindset that I can really kind of immediately see where something came from. So this story and observations kind of center around my recently found love for videography, photography, and storytelling, and how certain changes in my mindset influenced my creativity, but also my understanding of me and the world around me. So like many probably right now, or this time last year, I had a plan, and then COVID happened. So my plan was to build West Cork Discovered by exploring West Cork, going around, traveling around West Cork, and creating content for places and events that I visit and experience, and leveraging photo and video to then, you know, share that with other people and create a platform for West Cork. But obviously, I had to rethink how I would grow this venture during COVID-19, because of course the whole premise was to explore West Cork and to encourage others to explore it. So during a time when we were constrained to 2 and 5 kilometers, that just seemed an entirely impossible thing to achieve. So at first, I was really frustrated, and so I decided to wait for better times, wait for, I don't know, wait for you know, this to blow over, this to go away. And at one point, I even considered putting the whole thing on hold or just giving up, because up to that point, I saw these restrictions as a limitation and as a showstopper. And I was kind of totally focused on a world post-COVID. I was no longer interested in the here and now, because the here and now was not letting me do what I wanted to do. But then I grew impatient. I'm not very patient, and so I have this, you know, had this thing I wanted to do, but I had these limitations. So I developed a concept after kind of much pondering and sulking and, you know, growing impatient and more impatient. I suddenly kind of had an idea of a concept of a series of short films that would leverage the limitations as opposed to being restricted by them. So in other words, I was gonna take these limitations and see if I can actually tell a story around the limitations themselves. So I decided to make the very thing that was holding me back be the center of that concept. So instead of running away from it, I'm kind of going towards it. And I figured if I can't explore further, sort of wider, perhaps I could explore deeper or differently. So maybe instead of encouraging others to explore further, I maybe encourage others to kind of look around them and not be limited by the physical distance available, but to explore the limitless detail that's inside of the physical limitation. So for myself, I was going to explore what I can find within these limitations. Now, I will admit that I have an unfair advantage of living where I live, and within those 5 kilometers, I have, so in my mindset, of course, these are places I go to every day. So my mindset, German, not maybe necessarily that spectacular or that wonderful, but of course, I accept that others who maybe live, you know, somewhere not as pretty, you know, it may look different. So what I settled on was to find out how much I can experience in one day within 5 kilometers from home in 3 different locations: sunrise, midday, and sunset, and to try and build a sort of an arc over that day. I was very precise about this. So I took Google Maps and I figured out how to, you know, look, how to measure distances and so on. So I kind of drew the whole thing, and I was going to be limited to exactly that space. But I'm going into going to stop talking now for a little while, and I'll ask Potty to play the complete 3-part series. I originally released the 3 videos in 3 different parts over 3 weeks, and then I re-edited the whole thing into just 1 video. It's a bit shorter as well, which is just under 10 minutes. And then afterwards, I'll talk to you a little bit about my learnings and observations and mindset shift that I had experienced from making these series. Some are very, very surprising to me and kind of mind-boggling in certain ways. So I think I probably need to stop sharing so that you can.
Perfect, yeah. And I'll share from my side here, Michel. So if there's any problems, let me know. So I'll be sharing sound and video.
We're now in our 3rd lockdown, and I'm finally getting around to finishing editing the short video series that I shot back in November of last year. At the beginning of that lockdown, I wrote down a list of all these spectacular places I was going to explore as soon as that lockdown was going to be over, and I was really looking forward to shooting video and taking photos there and sharing them with you. But then as the weeks went on, I kind of started getting really impatient about getting out there. So I asked myself, how much could I explore in one day within the limitations of 5 kilometers from home in my immediate surroundings here in West Cork if I thought differently about my surroundings, if I looked closer? Could I see it in a light I haven't seen it before? How many new sounds can I hear if I listen? How many different emotions can I feel if I just am? If I shut off the noise and just forget that this is a limitation, but try and find the infinite detail in what is right in front of me every day. If I just search, if I show up early, at the right time, to be there when night turns into day and my surroundings come to life. The ones I see every day, and somehow I felt I had experienced something new at a place I thought had nothing new to offer. If, instead of walking through these woods, I walked among them. Its sounds, its smells, its textures. If I stop crouch down, look up, touch, feel. If I immersed myself, what new will I find if I reframe the seemingly familiar and step left instead, away from the path? Thread gently to explore and realize I've seen so very little before, because I came here not to be, but to get away from my inbox, my likes, and my external validation. And I stop, listen, slow down, because everything can wait, and most of it matters not. For now, I just am, immersed. Standing at the edge of the lake, looking at the setting sun and its last warming rays reaching across the water, I remembered something I learned about photography. To look around and be curious about what I might not be seeing, about what's behind me and what the sun's light might be illuminating. So, this seemingly ordinary lake had a surprise in store for me. For what I found was that the main event was happening not in front of me, but behind me, with colors I never thought I could see in such an ordinary place. As I reflect on this day, I realize once more that what I thought I knew about my surroundings was not all there was to see. That what is all around me is able to surprise me if I look closer or from new perspectives. If I stay curious and I'm willing to search, willing to try, fail, and try again, a different day, a different time, or in a different way. Truth be told, telling this 3-part story took 5 failed attempts. 5 very early and cold mornings, lots of coffee, and endless patience. But if these limitations taught me anything, it is that kilometers, restrictions, or social distance don't always have to be limiting if I'm open to new ways to see my surroundings, think differently about the way I experience them and my relationship with them. I look forward to times of more freedom, but for now, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. So as you probably, or maybe at the end, got a sense, sort of when we left off, I was frustrated, or before I kind of created this concept and produced this. I was very frustrated with COVID-19, with the restrictions, with these limitations and so on. And you probably got a sense at the end that I had a sense of peace with it at the end, where because I realized that actually, do you know what, I'm actually really fortunate, and actually there's nowhere else I'd rather be right now. I guess probably kind of summed it up. Just a personal shift in mindset. I think that I observed myself in that. So I'm going to just make some observations in terms of mindset, in terms of creativity, and so on, that I learned, and perhaps this resonates with some of you. Perhaps these are experiences you've had yourself, or perhaps there's something in there that allow you to kind of maybe approach a problem in a different way, that might allow you to have a different outcome. So in part one, really, I wanted to try and experience my local beach, Warren Strand, which I go to 3 or 4 times a week. I know, lucky, thank you. Where I swim, I surf, I kite surf, I walk, I take photos, and of course I play with my daughter there all year round. So again, I know, unfair advantage, but this episode was the only one for which I had a title before producing it. I knew I was going to call it First Light, because it was the first thing in the morning. So I had set out very early in the morning on 5 different days, the 5th one being the one I got lucky, with that beautiful mist over the ocean, together with the stunning sunrise and so on. Because in the first 4 attempts, the weather just really didn't work out. And after the initial first 4 failed attempts, and when I knew that this day was going to be perfect, I kind of felt a lot of pressure on myself. But then I realized I'm actually the only one with any expectations. I wasn't doing this for anyone else. Like, nobody had, was waiting for this. Like, I'm not an employee anymore that has to deliver something. But instead, I can just be a free creator. And I kind of had a little chat with myself when I got there, because I could feel I wasn't really free. My mind wasn't open. And I knew that I had to let go of kind of any and all expectations and preconceived ideas of success. And what happened on that 5th attempt, and kind of probably lucky that it was the 5th, as in that the first 4 didn't work out, because I didn't really have that realization yet in my mind that I needed to let go of these conventional expectations. So what happened on that day was quite astonishing when I kind of think about it. I had no idea what opening your mind and your senses would do to curiosity and creativity. Something kind of gradually changed and intensified over the course of the day, and I'm going to dig a little deeper into that and what that meant in real life. So at the start of the day, after I kind of had to sit down with myself, where I kind of realized that I wasn't in the right frame, that I needed to let go of these pressures and expectations, I just decided to just approach the beach, which was still in the dark, with no expectations, just nothing to lose, and to just listen, look around, pay attention, see what the light is doing, and see how all these elements are working together. And I was just going to be present and just observe and be part of it. I think so often we are somewhere, but we're not really 100% there. Like, originally, I think I was in my head already going to be in the editing room, and how this was going to work out, and how I was going to share it, and who was going to look at it, and who was going to judge it, and so on. So, and that, of course, is hugely limiting. So instead, again, I was just there and just part of it, and just let my senses dictate, and my creativity dictate of what I was going to do next. And by not having any distractions and being 100% immersed, and totally not invested in the outcome, because I can just decide not to share this ever, and that would be okay. I was hearing and seeing things I typically wouldn't. And I just let my cameras become part of the scenes, and then the ideas just started to flood in. And I quickly realized that less distractions, less noise, etc., was presenting me with so much more sensory experiences, more creativity, much faster ideas. Like oftentimes I'd have to think for quite a while as in how I would approach a certain shot, how I would frame it, and so on. But it was just suddenly coming much faster, because I was completely unattached to the outcome, and there was no expectation. So this was really just an experiment, because failure or failures along the way were certainly going to be part of the process, and they were. Most of the footage I threw out, but it really didn't matter. And I had not considered, in fact, I had not considered initially making any of the sounds, like the waves, the seagull, and so on, part of the video experience. But because my senses were so alert and I was hearing as much as I was seeing, I knew at that moment that I had to go and record these, that they needed to be part of that experience. So initially it was going to be just video and music, and the music was going to be very important. But I decided to kind of reverse that and go and record all these sounds. And there was one particular seagull was very helpful, came quite close. So I would never have had those thoughts if my kind of mind wasn't as open and my senses weren't as open to all these. So in retrospect, I would say, so eliminating the expectations, letting go of all those preconceived ideas of success. So I could have attached myself to this needing to be a success in some way, whether it's an amount of views I might get on a particular social media channels or anything like that. And then just to be 100% present, to just listen, observe, and just to be, and to not have a defined outcome. And again, accepting failure as part of the process. I think those elements really allowed me to be exponentially more creative, work exponentially faster in terms of creative workflow. So that's kind of very interesting to me, because again, I don't really understand why, but I'm not sure it matters why. It's just, that those are just things that I've learned. I would love to explore why, I guess, but for now, I'm happy with just having learned this. In part two, in the flow, so I ended up calling this episode "Immersed" because really, that's what was happening with me. So my senses at this point were even more heightened, although physically I was tired because I'd gotten up at like 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that, whatever. And just filming itself is quite tiring and so on. But I was just totally in the flow. And again, my senses were super high. My mindset was just 100% switched on, with ideas flowing in all of the time. And one thing I kind of observed in retrospect is that a lot of the factors that I feel led to a more heightened sense of creativity and more open mind to new ideas came from being more open to senses that I'm kind of struggling how to describe these, but their senses, they're maybe described as more soft energy. So like touch, emotions, textures, and so on. I had kind of eliminated all the high expectations, sort of defined outcomes, hard targets, but without losing sense of kind of a vision and a purpose. And I'm curious at this point, I'm still curious, whether perhaps a lot of these a lot of the sort of hard goal type elements, so aggressive targets, defined outcomes, conventional ideas of success, and so on. So things you would very typically find in a corporate environment, maybe, whether they actually hinder curiosity and creativity, because, and this is my theory, and I mean, I could be 100% wrong about this, but I kind of connected something that I read in a book by Seth Godin talking about the lizard brain. So my theory now is that basically, because I'd eliminated all these elements that trigger the lizard brain typically, because they trigger a fear of failure. So if I have conventional goals, ideas of success, external validation for work, those often trigger a fear-based mindset for being called out, and achievements that can be measured and represented through conventional success. If I had attached myself to the outcome where this is going to be judged, whether, let's say, for instance, on YouTube, and I'm worried about the comments and what I'm going to say, people are going to hate it, whatever. Suddenly, I believe that lizard brain would trigger a fear mindset, and I would do more conventional stuff. So I would probably think, oh, I know what works on YouTube or on Instagram or whatever. So I'll go with that, more of that. I probably would have never, touched a moss on a tree, because for fear of people going, he's lost his mind, and now he's touching trees, and he's whatever. But because of the mindset I was in, I just really didn't care, and I still don't care. So there was also big personal learning for me in this episode, and I'm happy or open to share this with you. But I openly explored my sort of inherent need for external validation that I've had for a very long time. And I've since this realization that I kind of came out in part 2, done a lot of work on this, realizing that actually I will never successfully realize my life and my lifestyle on my own terms, and that vision that I have for my life, unless I can let go of that. Because if I base my life on external validation, then I'm not really ever going to do what I really want to do. So I think that was a huge lesson for me that actually could totally have jeopardized my search and quest for my best life. In part 3, reflections, I suppose, to me, this was kind of all about learning and kind of sort of what have I learned. And obviously I ended up calling it reflections as a visual wordplay on both the reflections in the water that I was super lucky to actually have on that day, but also reflections on myself and what this day had meant for me, and kind of what I learned about myself. And again, that sort of that peace I found with living in this time, and being where I am in this time, and being restricted to where I am in this time, and to kind of see my true self. And so to me, this was all about kind of realization that as long as I stay curious, I search, I try, I fail, I try again, and I always look for the beauty in the ordinary, I could be at a lot more peace than if I'm constantly kind of looking for the next thing, or the something that's kind of outside of where I am right now. And I think particularly in a world with social media and so on, where like if I look on Instagram, I'm constantly going, oh, I wish I was there, I wish I was there, I wish I was there, I wish I was there. But actually, no, I very much want, and I'm on Instagram, so I'm not, it's not a negative comment, but I guess it's just important to kind of find peace at where you are at, and where you are, as opposed to kind of looking outwards. So I guess that's kind of what I wanted to share with you today in terms of my own observations. But obviously, I'd love to hear from any of you if any of my observations kind of ring true with anyone else, or whether maybe you have some super clever insight into kind of what I've observed and what happened in that day, and of whether there's some sort of merit to this, and some of the theories that I'm theorizing on, or observations I'm making, or things I'm suggesting.
Very cool, Michel. Really cool. I know I've written a page of notes here. I love the idea, if I just am. What happens if I just am? I think that's it's so simple, but it's inspiring. I just am. I'm just what I am, and I am where I am at that particular time. I love the theory as well that the more we put these really heavy, sharp targets on us, that it really dims our curiosity, you know, and that lizard brain is active, you know, it's really fight or flight mode, and it just doesn't allow in those insights. So I really like that. And I know there's comments flying in here, you know, I'll call them out here to you. Michel, though, Robert is saying, I love it, a lifestyle business on your own terms, a man after my own heart. Len says, next time you go for a walk, bring a camera. You'll be surprised what you can capture when you're out and about. Tom is saying, very powerful. Orla, wow, powerful and beautiful. And then Brian, and I'm sure Brian, you'll have a few comments here, you know, just saying that it reminds her of work by Carla and Connolly, who we had earlier in, I think, before Christmas. Michael Reardon, beautiful. Michelle loved it. Aideen saying sensational. Every color, texture, and movement was intensely powerful, amazing. And that's an interesting comment, because I know I found myself actually going into some sort of trance or something as I was watching. I definitely wasn't in my room, my boring room here. I was somewhere else. So I think Aideen's point is very well made there. You know, that these colors pulled us somewhere else, you know. And I noticed in at the very end you said some, what was it, some lake somewhere sort of thing.
Yeah.
My God, it was a powerful lake, wherever that lake is. You know,
yeah. Well, I purposely wanted that lake to remain just a random lake.
Yeah.
Make a point is that this lake doesn't need to have a name. It's like it represents that thing that you will find just somewhere random. So I feel if I attach a name to it, even then it becomes like a destination, and then, you know, it's more than what it should be. It really isn't. And if you saw this, like, you know, at a time of the day when it's not, but all these things, stuff isn't happening, honestly, it's actually not that spectacular at all, you know. Like, it's really just ordinary. But so it's also about, like, you know, maybe not going to that place at the typical time that you would go. Like, what could you find, you know, at a different time of year, early in the morning, late at night, whatever, you know, whatever it is. So.
And, you know, a question, Michel, did you see something through the camera that you wouldn't have seen if you hadn't the camera?
Yeah. So, and this is funny, right? So this is interesting. So, my daughter called me out on this once. She said, "Yeah, but Daddy, you're not really," and like, this is coming from a 10-year-old at the time. Sorry, she's 11 now. But yeah, we had a chat about sort of mindfulness and all that. I said, "Yeah, but Dad, how can you be mindful when you're walking around with your camera?" Because she was sort of comparing it with, like, you know, you got your phone with you all the time, but you've got your camera with you, you know, but then you're distracted by the camera. And so I was explaining to her that it's actually quite the opposite. It's that because the lens, well, depending obviously on what kind of lens I use, but I actually generally tend to work with longer focal lenses, so they kind of compress what I see. And there's probably something behind the reason why I prefer that as well. But so I kind of see only a limited scope of the whole landscape. So I'm focusing kind of on, and I find that I'm then much more kind of present and in it. And I guess to the point of the comment that everything's super intentional, it totally is. Because, sorry, I just knocked my microphone. It is very, very intentional. So every single frame in the video has an intention and tries to tell either a story or is part of, like, or represents a texture, a color, feeling, whatever it is, you know, whether it's touching a tree or whether it's, you know, it's light coming through, sun rays coming through leaves, whatever it is, there's an intention behind everything. And so yeah, sort of to answer that, I guess, is that I kind of see things more intense through a lens, more detailed, because there's no distraction, of course. What I have there, so there's no one left or right. It's just what I see. And sometimes, of course, you can miss stuff with that. So, and that's why we're taught to constantly wander around and move around and look in all directions for opportunities, because when you have that lens in front of you, you could be spending too much time just looking in one direction. And in fact, that could have easily happened at that lake, because when you walk up to the lake, there's naturally a path that leads forward, and the sun is setting. So your instinct would be, oh, look at the sun setting. But as you've probably seen in the video, there's not one single time when you see the sun, because the sun wasn't the subject. The sun setting wasn't the subject. There's one photo with the sun in it, all right, but the subject was what the sun was doing, all behind and around me, not the sunset itself.
That's very interesting. So it's intentional, but also very intense, you know, and the importance of walking around, you know, and looking behind, looking to the side. Bryony, I don't know if you have some questions, and I'll read out more comments then afterwards.
Well, it was just a comment, really, just that links in with that attachment that I just put as part of a comment. But we had Michelle, we had an artist called Caroline Connolly, who did a workshop through the Glucksman last year when they were doing kind of workshops through lockdown and trying to engage people in kind of artistic practice and getting out of their head and that kind of thing. And it was very similar in terms of thinking about where you are and like going deep into where you are and really exploring it. So whether there's a historical link, for example, in your 5K, you know, if you don't have access to those kind of beautiful scenic surroundings, then maybe going in depth in terms of what can you find out about where you walk past every day. Is there a building perhaps that looks really interesting? And people dug into the history of that building, for example. I live near the Ballincollig Regional Park, and that's got the history of the gunpowder mills. So I did a little bit of research around that. So it was just, as well, very similar to what you're saying. It's just be happy where you are and learn to really appreciate where you are, you know, and she also said whether if that's through sound or photography or anything like that. So yeah, it was more a comment really than anything, but as the other guy said, really resonated. The video was just like hypnotic. It was just absolutely beautiful. I'm going to watch it again for sure. So yeah, but I'm conscious that others have their hands up there as well, so I don't want to take all the time as well. But thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you. So a few comments here again, Michel. So I'm just scrolling up. So from Robert, the idea of the conventional versus just being suggests to me the ever-present tension between what it means to be mortal, i.e. you have to labour to survive or you will die, and the desire to be immortal, i.e. totally independent from needing to do same. Michel's departure from the corporate world and move to a self-directed life is a manifestation of this point. And I think that's a really strong point. And actually, you could nearly feel it. At least I could in the movie as well, Michel. You'd spoken about your journey from that corporate world, you know, and this seemed to be a really important part of maybe even your own transformation in a way. This period of time, you know.
100%, very much so. And I realized within this that I had let go. So I'm not physically in that job anymore. So I'm in a new world. But one thing that I realized through this that I hadn't let go was that thing that we get in that conventional or corporate world, whatever, is that external validation constantly, you know, the pat on the back, that thing that we. And so I realized that I'm completely conditioned to this, right? And that so in my, you know, that I cannot have a life on my own terms. If I still attach those external terms to it, I have to create my own terms, and what success or failure looks like to me. And that was a huge realization. Like I just worry if I hadn't realized this, like I would have on the surface lived a life on my own terms, but they weren't my own terms, really, truly, you know. And I love what the person, sorry, I forgot his or her name, said about the mortality. It was so part of the huge drive for me to move out of that corporate world and live life, as I call it, on my own terms, was I just asked myself every day. I started to be obsessed with the question of the realization that I have one life. This is it, right? Well, actually, depending on your philosophy and whatever belief system, right? Whatever. Okay, fine. But right now, for all I know, this is my one chance at life and happiness and so on. And is this the best life I can have? And the fear of that started to be so much bigger than fear of failure or whatever else, that I'm like, yeah, you know, no, I gotta try.
Okay, so and I think actually even judging from some of the comments here, Michel, what intrigued me is the fact we can create a digital experience out of something that is really personal for you, and that we can take something from it. And I think, judging by the comments here, lots of people took lots of things from it, whether it's, going into that zone, into a different zone, a very different zone, to maybe working on a program like this, or maybe working the day job or whatever. So I think it's powerful that something can translate between you being in that lake to us then watching that digital video later. So Maria here saying, fabulous, Michel, I really enjoyed it. We have Caroline, I found a video so peaceful. So again, people really getting lots from these videos. Your learnings resonated so much with me. I love the idea of not being at the finish line in your head, but being 100% present in the moment. So a really powerful way of explaining it, Caroline. And I think that's a comment more to Bryony there. So I think for me, it's fascinating, Michel, and I'd just like to bring you back to something. This is maybe a bit more mundane in a way, but I heard you mentioning at some stage, that these 3 businesses that you've on the go, but you're also going to look at this idea of maybe trying to support craftspeople maybe that are working in West Cork. Do you want to tell us a bit about what this is about?
Well, I guess, so with West Cork Discovered, I kind of have lots of ideas of the directions it could go, but one kind of vision or idea, I don't know which one it is at this point, is that to sort of create a brand West Cork, right? Because I think, if an individual, let's call it, I don't know, someone doing pottery, right, and it's called Mary's Pottery from West Cork. If Mary's Pottery is trying to compete in the online worldwide landscape, right, then like it's super noisy, like very, very noisy out there right now, and it's gonna get more noisy, right? Whether it's social media or Google, whatever it is, it's very, very hard unless you're really, really good at it to compete there and to be seen, right? Outside of your immediate geography, of course, right? And so I wonder whether would West Cork have enough, perhaps, is there enough there to create a brand, that you could leverage, right? So similar to, like, I don't know if, cars made in Germany, they work, or Swiss watches made in Switzerland, they super on time, or whatever it is, right? Belgian chocolate and whatever, So if you had, like, say, arts, craft stuff from West Cork, it's like it's like a thing, right? Or maybe there is an emotional connection for people who live abroad, but actually originally from Ireland, or perhaps have a real affinity to it or whatever, So you could maybe leverage it in different ways. And then to create sort of an online, I don't know, marketplace or platform where what they make or what they do could be leveraged, so that it's only the platform that needs to compete in that space, and inside of then. Plus, also, you'd have a lot of adjacencies. So you might have a few famous people in West Cork in the art space, and you have some up and coming, and the up and coming could could be in the same presence as the more famous ones. So then then it becomes a community, and it's the more successful helping others coming up as well, and so on. Because, like, what I see at the micro level is super supportive and community based and very integrated, but then at the macro level in the world, it's everyone out there kind of trying to shout super loud, and I think it also kills creativity in many ways, in that if you're trying to play to the algorithms, the Instagram algorithms or the YouTube algorithm or the Google algorithm, you're probably not going to be creative, because you need to beat the algorithm. To beat the algorithm, you got to do certain things. They're probably not even what you want to do. And I'm kind of struggling with that myself as well right now. Is that you need to do certain things to, and so then it becomes a kind of a race to the bottom. So that's kind of the vision or ideas I had around that.
And come here, Michel, I know you nearly issued a challenge or a call to action for other people that are interested maybe in similar areas and maybe having a similar vision to you to come forward and to engage with you. So you're definitely calling for collaboration, you know. So
Yeah.
I think we can share maybe your details as well, Michel, you know, for a similar minded. And I can actually see some of the comments underneath. There's definitely some similar minded people. So I'll come back to Bryony's comment there, but I can see Grania again, you know, putting that invite forward for you to go forest bathing in West Cork, you know, and I know Grania is investigating maybe that as a lifestyle type, maybe business or whatever it is. I see also Aideen, who's involved in a startup crafts startup, saying 9 million% in agreement. There's a market for West Cork brands. I'd buy all of it herself, you know. So I think that there's, I would think there's definitely people that are of a very similar mindset to Michel, or even if there's stuff we're doing here that you feel would be relevant to what you want to do in the future. I think there's always a door open for you to come back here to this group, you know, and hopefully we'll have a new group coming in maybe in sort of September. But definitely there's room for the people already on this program to engage with you. I see Bryony here has given a few book recommendations which link in with what we're talking about here. Phosphorescence is one, Revelation is another, The Untethered Soul is another one. So again, I think what you're talking about definitely seems to be resonating with Bryony's reading habits, and she's
Very
nodding at me here, which is
perhaps you could share these books with me or with that would be great.
Yeah,
definitely.
Sure. I can message you. Yeah, and it's just happy coincidence because you're right. They're just either just recently finished them or listening to audiobooks at the moment. So yeah, just some of the themes that you're talking about there, you may just be interested in diving into them a little bit more. So yeah, happy to share them with you.
And maybe to turn the question the other way then, because maybe Bryony also wants to maybe if she still has room on that bookshelf or the locker by the bed, what sort of stuff do you read, Michel? What sort of stuff interests you?
Right. Yeah. So but the one book that triggered the entire I was going to say life change for me initially was a book by Seth Godin called The Icarus Deception, which kind of I guess it really spoke to me. I know some people who read it who kind of found it a bit too unspecific, but like I think it's maybe people with the minds who are just not quite there in the mindset to be able to take something that there's maybe not an immediate action, like there's not a list of to-dos, or not a, but there's more of a concept, more of a a reframing of your mind. So that definitely is, I would say, probably my number one. I guess it's the one that triggered me to go, maybe I do have something to say outside of put my best ideas forward in a business meeting. And then the other one, if I can remember the name of now, but it's a small little book. I'm gonna send it to you. Maybe you can share it with the group. But it's quite spiritual in a way. It's kind of more. It's about finding your inner calling, kind of thing. I forgot what it's called now. It was just a small little book. Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. Kind of. I read it. I find some of it a bit. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about sort of slightly exploiting the super low paid people in Asia. I don't know. But the concept I think is great. I think there's parts I always love taking stuff out of a book that I can work with, and other stuff that I can't. But yeah, parts of it kind of were encouraging to understand that actually the whole thing might be doable, like particularly the whole idea of like this location independence, not necessarily, in my case, not necessarily nomadic, because I don't necessarily, it's not necessarily what I want to do, because I have a daughter here as well, and so I don't at this point in my life want to be nomadic in that sense, but still location independent. So that was another one. I actually found Think and Grow Rich really interesting in terms of this whole concept of, I know it's super old actually, but now I do practice affirmations and like visualization and stuff like that, right? But I also understand that, or my belief anyways, is that you have to do an awful lot more than just like, you know, attract something by sending some vibes out there. But I think it's a bit more, you know, it also needs a lot of action behind it. But yeah, I do like that, because it's kind of, it's kind of, I do work. And the funny thing is, I actually, and this is true, right? I have actually written in my diary, I could show you now if I could reach it, but I have actually written in my journal, was it three years before I left my corporate job, I wrote in an exact date at which I was going to leave. And I know at the time I was going to hand my resignation, right? As it turned out, I was able to negotiate a redundancy package, thank God. But that's the only thing that wasn't correct in my affirmation. But the date was out by 7 days. I swear to God, I was out by 7 days. And it was written 3 years before I left.
So again,
hats off to you, Michel.
Like I don't like I was and I'm hands up. I would just said during that time I was skeptical, because the funny thing happens, it's like for the longest time nothing happens. You get nowhere closer to that, you know, to that affirmation, and you keep reading and you're going, I'm not sure really, you know. I was skeptical, you know.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and there's more comments. So there's absolutely flow of comments coming all the time, and hopefully I'll get through. And I have missed some of them here, Michel. You know, so Brendan is saying, and I'll come back to Jennifer's one shortly. Brendan is saying, do you have any tips on mapping your narrative over the 3 parts that people here could use to tell their own stories, maybe the stories around our projects, Michel?
Right. Yes. Before I forget, actually, the number 2 book on my list, Miracle Morning.
Miracle Morning.
The power of morning routines is just like, I've understood it. And I'm not a morning person, like, at all. But it's incredible. So, yeah, so to build an arc around a story. Yes. So I would say in storytelling, number 1, for me, it's got to be personal and relatable, as in like that you got to dig quite, it's got to be somewhat personal, I think, and like, you know, open. And secondly, I would say is, so try and build an arc in that there's a starting point, and then so you need to somehow find a way to come back to where you started at the end. So with me, it was, so I told you in the beginning that I was creating this new life for myself, that I've designed a life on my own terms type of thing. And at the very end is this realization. It's the second last sentence of what I said to you, was that there was a big personal learning in the episode, where in the last episode, where I explored that need for external validation, and that's, you know, if I didn't have that figured out, this story that I was starting to tell you in the very beginning was never going to make any sense, because it's not really life on my own terms. So it's finding something that you can plug in at the very end that comes back all the way to the very beginning. In fact, it's not just storytellers, but even like, and in many ways, so stand-up comedians, for instance, they usually have an arc in their acts, where there's one joke at the very, very end which takes all the way back to the beginning, because most of the time stand-up comedy is actually still about storytelling as well. So that, to me, would be the number 1 thing, would be that you have like a clear beginning, like a beginning of your journey, and then you have the exploration, and then at the end you have some sort of reflection. But so one strong sentence or word that comes back all the way to where you started, to wrap it up. It's like the bookend, you know, it's essentially like a bookend.
Very cool.
Does that make sense?
It does. It makes sense to me anyway, and I'm sure to those that are asking. So, and I'm also I just copped onto the time as well, Michel, because I think this could go on and on forever. I think this discussion. I think that says
I'm
a lot.
okay for time, but obviously you have a course.
Actually, well, no, I'm
in more of a framework than I do in my day.
Yeah, so I'm the good copsy, so I'll let it go as long as it wants, as long as Brian doesn't take a stick out there or something. So, and I'm just looking again here. So I see Aideen is saying, wow, that's serious visualization. So she's talking about the 3-year thing, being able to not only set that date and then realize it. And then Robert is saying, with regards to Michel's affirmation, Billy Connolly, the comedian, always said that you and the universe subconsciously guides you to where you want to go. And that is extremely powerful. In his own case, he wrote it down on a piece of paper that he wanted to be a comedian and put it in his wallet, and the rest is history. Yeah, so that's a story about Billy Connolly. Brendan, great insight. It's like confirmation of the goal. And I can see, just going back here, Jennifer is saying, you know, in relation to the idea of coming up with a West Cork brand, have you spoken to Cork Craft and Bench Space? They have both mentioned having a Cork-focused brand. Design and Crafts Council of Ireland are relaunching the Made Local campaign in 2021, which is working to establish a common brand umbrella under which crafters can sell. So I know probably Jennifer knows a lot more about that. So again, if that's some maybe connection that Jennifer would be happy to make and that you'd be interested in, Michel, or whoever else is on this call, then consider it.
One thing I learned from my first few ventures is that whatever I'm going to do next or on top of this, I'm not going to do on my own. So that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I have all of them there. And I'm just looking if I've missed anything here. No. So is there anything, Michel, that you're surprised we didn't ask you, or that anything that you felt we'd be more interested that we weren't, or vice versa, that we wouldn't be interested we were interested in?
Well, no, actually, I mean, I'm super humbled by the feedback, which is incredible. And actually, do you know what? And this is another thing that, of course, I'm not surprised I'm learning, is that this feedback on a one-to-one level from like individuals that, like, okay, I don't know, but they're, you know, there's an encounter there, is so much more important to me than, like, I actually have put the video on YouTube. Now I'm not really doing anything proper on YouTube, whatever, but it's so much more important than that kind of feedback, which is, you know, which is numeric or whatever. So I want to thank you for that, and for everyone who's commented or whatever. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And if, you know, if it has made you feel something in any way, then I feel that to me that's amazing, and it was very worthwhile doing. What no one asked, and this is interesting, and I love that no one asked, was anything to do like with equipment or anything like that, because it's totally relevant, right? Because because like a lot of the time when people see me out and about or filming or whatever, they want to know about the drone, they want to know about the camera, they want to know about this, that, and the other, and like, you know, and I'm so super happy no one was interested in any of that, because it's completely irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think people were pulled into the picture, into the video, you know, where they actually didn't see probably the camera or the equipment anymore. They were there with you, you know, even though they were based wherever they were across this country at the moment. You know, and just one question, and we won't hold you much longer then, Michel. How easy has it been, and how accepting is our society of people that go on the journey that you've decided to go on? How easy is it to go on that journey?
It's not really, to be honest, easy at all. No. I would say, like, we, when I say we, is the greater we, I guess, are probably still hugely judged or assessed by what we have to show for, in the sense of, I don't know, the car we drive, or the house we have, or the the job title, I guess. Of course, now I get to call myself anything fancy I want. It has absolutely no meaning at all. If I want, I could be the CEO of like this micro business. But I tend not to do that. But anyway, so yeah, I think you have to really be willing to strip down and let go of kind of letting other people judge you or assess you by what you are, what you do on a conventional level. Yeah, I think you just have to say to yourself, look, I understand where you're coming from. I know where you're coming from, but it's just not my world anymore. And you can't really judge me. I mean, you can, but it won't affect me. But for that, you need to find a huge amount of inner, like, peace and self sort of awareness and so on. But yeah, the outside world still largely will look at you as, particularly unless you have a huge business, as an entrepreneur that has, like, then it's different, I think, but being like a startup entrepreneur person, that's probably still kind of, particularly in a creative space, is still a little wacky probably, but West Cork's okay for that.
It's been spectacular, Michel, and I know I'll be catching up with you shortly anyway. And I'm sure I'd invite others, if there's something of interest to yourselves and Michel. Michel would be up for that as well. We're going to take a break for maybe about 4 minutes, 5 minutes, guys. So we might come back. We'll stretch the legs, and we'll allow Michel gather his stuff up and make an exit. So just a special thanks again, Michel. It's been absolutely spectacular, and I know hopefully it's the first of future engagements as well with this program. So thanks again, Michel.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.